Well, good morning, and I'm not sure if any of the youth are here today at this service, but if you are, welcome, and welcome to everyone on the continuation of our Lenten journey, which, of course, is unique for each one of us, as we all bear the opportunity to grow closer and explore what it means to be a Christian, or in perhaps other words, what it actually means to follow Jesus in our daily walk and talk during good times as well as those inevitable obstacles that come in our way. And as we come to realize how Jesus has our backs, we begin to understand more about love. And we learn to see how hope transforms defeat into opportunity, and marvel at how an ethic of gratitude reshapes grief. We call such transitions the emergence of faith, and that's not such an easy ethos to acquire, or once acquired to keep in balance as we navigate through our busy lives. And so it was for those reasons, in part, that we've been exploring the spiritual discipline of the rule of life, a tool that helps us reveal the character of God and of ourselves in relationship to God and to one another, and in the process becoming mindful of an inherent sacredness we share with all creation, with those creatures great and small, and with the vast web of growing things, the land, the water, even with brother sun and sister moon, brother wind and sister air, such that our eyes may be opened to visions pure and fair. So now down to reality. We've examined our relationship with God, with that we proclaim that what we actually live, and even when God seems absent. We looked at what God-created creatures we are, those that we call me, considering when and how ourselves need to take responsibility for loving as God loves, not simply counting on God to do all the loving. And last week, we looked at our connection with other people, which of course can best be described by our baptismal covenant that has us promise to strive for justice and peace, respecting the dignity of all people. Now, lest some of us squirm over words like discipline and rule, which of course imply obedience, which can really be off-putting to some of us, let me assure you that I'm not talking about something grim and rigid and duty-bound. If you think that, I guess you don't really know me. In my experienced opinion, there's not only room for the free spirits in this room and around the world. There is also a deep need, because they are often more attuned to creative alternatives, which can be useful at times. And yet, I do not imply dismissal of the virtues reason and decorum provide. Now, personally, I describe my rule as a guide to becoming the very best God-created human I was uniquely designed to be, and to which God loved me into being. And whether or not that definition works for you, I hope we can all agree we're not talking about gritting our teeth in the pursuit of perfection. Perfection is, after all, God's realm. As for us, it's more about clothing ourselves in the love that we have received, so that we may in turn love God with all our being, and love other humans with whom we share this planet. And that's no easy task, but that's why a rule is useful. It keeps life's adventure in balance, helps us understand that we live a bigger story than one of private individualism. We keep our ears open to the voice of God and reminded that, at least according to the rule that I follow, or try to follow, to consider one of the great spiritual questions of life, and not the one that asks, is there life after death, but the one that asks, is there life before death? It's about paying attention to God and attention to one another. And the other is not necessarily human. So let's turn to consider our relationship with all creation in kinship with our Creator. We are, after all, not over and above or outside of nature. We're a part of nature. We're part of the entire ecosystem, and we are a part of the all that God has made and brought to this fragile earth. I know you know it's a huge topic, and we can't cover it all in one sermon. So I'm only going to mention a few of the burning issues that you hear about in the news, like the climate change and global warming. And just as a quick example, we hear how polar bears are losing the battle as the seas around them melt. And therefore they are denied an icy island on which to live. And they no longer are able to roll around on their icy playground, and instead headed to what metaphysics is calling the pole of relative inaccessibility, which is that imaginary point on the Arctic Ocean farthest from land in any direction you look. As author Annie Dillard explained, a pole of the most trouble. It is also a pole of great price. Well, pollution of our environment is a serious concern affecting that ecosystem. And while planet-wide poverty and hunger overwhelm our ability to effectively apply the covenant of justice and respect, I'm not sure we often think about it in terms of those who must live in the sewer system at home, as their home on a cold night, while we might cuddle up by the fire. And yet they and we are all God-created creatures. Now, we talk about how impossible it is to counter the world's crises personally. I mean, what are we supposed to do? So I was really interested to read just this week that our presiding bishop is proposing a program called Take the Pledge and Care for God's Creation. Timely? Well, it's very comprehensive, and we're not going to review it right now, but it's worth a read. And you'll find it in the e-Spirit that landed in your mailbox, I believe, last Thursday. One thing that was definitely emphasized, and I bring to our attention, is that we are called as followers of Jesus to do something about this world's immediate crises. And one simple solution that Presiding Bishop Curry proposed was to have us change our habits and choose to live more gently. Now, that not only sounds reasonable and doable and urgent, but it really got me to thinking about, imagine how a gentled way of being might restrain all that abusive disrespect and angry accusations that dishonor our relationships worldwide and in our nation, in politics, in the workplace, and even in our homes. So the question pleads, what are you and I going to do about this today? So I think it begins with paying attention, making room for silence where God can get a word in edgewise. Digging in the garden is a really good place to start, and it is the season. So put your hands in the dirt. Creation's fresh bounty beats the cacophony of sound and smell in your neighborhood grocery. And when we're paying attention, we become more aware and are better able to experience awe. As happened to me one early winter morning, not this year, but a couple of years ago, when I was opening up my shutters to start the day and say hi to God, and staring at me through one of those windows was a live raccoon. Now, he or she had climbed up on a chair to look in the window and seemed as surprised as I was. I came closer, and the raccoon inched forward. The raccoon pressed its snout against the window, and so did I on the other side. And we just looked at each other. And the animal's eyes seemed to have endless depth, as if I were staring straight into the soul of the universe. It was an experience I can't prove or even aptly explain, but to use the words of Carl Sagan, who is a cosmologist intrigued by mystery as well as proven truth, everything that I know as a human being, everything that I am tells me that that was real. I mean, I was part of something wonderful, a vision that reminded me undeniably how tiny and insignificant and how rare and precious we all are. A vision that tells us that we belong to something that is greater than ourselves, and that we are not, that none of us are ever alone. It seemed that this moment was not a meaningless accident. It was not subject to a science versus religion debate. Rather, it was simply a moment in time between two God-created creatures, without a plan, probably no future. And then it was just after that I read this, how humankind's very ability to comprehend the universe suggests a profound connection between the mind of humans and the works of God. Connection. I mean, even for non-believers, this understanding is, at minimum, a source of wonder and awe. And maybe that was, for me at least, a crossroads of understanding, where science and religion illuminate different mysteries. And perhaps it was, as a recent meditation from Richard Rohr proposed, that nature itself is the primary Bible, and the Word is the locus of the sacred, providing all the metaphors that soul needs for its growth. And so it was when I knocked on the door of a parishioner, and not with the usual communion case in hand, but with a bag full of dog cookies buried deep in my pocket so it would not be detected immediately. And I had come to give a little dog her pet blessing, since she had to miss the church event here. And I was glad as well for the opportunity to visit with her parents. We talked and spent some time with the dog so that the dog would feel comfortable when I would lift her up into my lap to provide the blessing. And she cooperated beautifully, no problem at all. The blessing was said, the cookie was delivered and accepted. And then she just looked at me, looked deeply into my eyes, and tilting her head a bit as she did. And I did likewise. And we stayed like that for a minute or more. And then when she looked at me as if to say, "I'll be right back," and then jumping off my lap, she walked very purposefully down the hall. And we heard some rustling going on before she returned, and then her little steps carried her back, indicating mission accomplished. But she carried something in her mouth, and obviously it was of great fascination to her family. And then she came to me and looked again at me before jumping right back into my lap. And then she gently gave me a toy doll that she had brought to me. And I heard a whisper, "That doll is her very, very favorite toy. She is giving you her best." I tell you, it felt to me the way it must have felt to Jesus when Mary poured her precious perfumed oil to anoint the feet of someone who had given his all, and she wanted to give her all in the most lavish manner she could imagine. So I have to tell you, I've had a lot of toys in my time, but never did one seem to fill that house with the fragrance of love. Thus says the Lord, I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?